to the road to growth, success of an entrepreneur.
We've raised the bar.
Learn firsthand from successful business owners and create your own path to success.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
It's time to hit the road to growth with team lead of the Enriquez Group, Realtor Vinny.
Hi, Road to Growth listeners. Today we have Chris. He is the founder of Novos. Looking good, keeping young. How would you describe Novos?
Novos is a consumer longevity platform. So we work with the top scientific minds in the world that study the biological process of aging, and we create natural patent-pending formulations to address those fundamental causes.
So, I mean, I've heard other people talk where they're you have basically your actual age and then you have your biological age. So it kind of affects your biological aging, I guess.
Yes, exactly. There are two different ages that we all have. This is a new concept for most people. So our chronological age is what we think of as our age. It's how many years we've been alive for. Yeah. But our biological age is actually how old we are effectively biologically. And believe it or not, only 10% of that is genetic. 90% of that is lifestyle. And you can see this in your everyday life. Everyone knows someone who you say they look very young for their age, or you also know people who look old for their age. And that's kind of the outward physical manifestation of biological aging. But there's more to it, obviously, internally in our organs and our cells.
So how young can you go with like Novos?
Well, so Novos is really more about slowing down the pace of your aging. Okay. So, there are things that you can do to try to reverse your biological age. And that is a little bit more controversial in scientific circles as to whether you are actually reducing your biological age. But what is not very controversial at all is the idea of slowing down your pace of aging, which we focus on more because that is the future. That is your current trajectory or your velocity right now. You want to slow that velocity down as much as possible. And there are lifestyle steps you can take to do that. So I'll give you an example. You can measure your biological age with a test that we sell called Novos Age. It's actually a test that looks at your epigenome and was created by researchers at Columbia and Duke University. It's not something in-house and corporate. This is academic. It's something that 45 different studies at 30 different labs around the world have used this test, and it's considered the most accurate of them all. And if you get a result of 1, that means that every 1 chronological year, you're aging 1 biological year. So you're an average person, essentially. If you're smoking a pack a day, maybe you're aging at 1.1 or 1.2, which would be 10 or 20% faster than average. But you can also slow it down. And for example, my results, the lab that runs these tests on our behalf said that after many thousands of tests, I had one of the best results they've ever seen. And it was 0.69, which means aging about 31% slower than the average person.
Wow. Okay. So let's rewind. We're going to get to, I guess, how you came across and built this company. But let's talk about young Chris. Was he always into kind of how young he felt? Was he athletic? I mean, who was young Chris?
So young Chris started to get into exercise when he was 12 years old. He saw an issue of Men's Health magazine and was inspired by it, but was stopped suddenly when I was diagnosed with a brain tumor when I was 16. So I had a seizure while on a school trip in New York City, and I woke up with blood all over my shirt. It had been because I severed my tongue during the seizure. And they immediately found a golf ball-sized tumor in my left temporal lobe above my left ear. And so that was a drawn-out period of surgery and recuperation. And then it even changed my philosophy on life and my perspective. And I went from playing on the high school football team to spending my Friday nights writing poetry. I mean, it was a complete transformation of me and my character and what I wanted out of life. And over the years, I then became increasingly interested in health, not from the purely superficial side, which is what I was into when I was 12. I wanted to be attractive to my female classmates. By 16, it evolved into a biological interest in health. How can I avoid disease and not be laying on a hospital bed contemplating mortality and whether I would live to see another day? I didn't want to ever go through that again. And so I wanted to understand how I could be healthy. Now, health it's evolved for me. When I was a teenager and in my 20s, my idea of health was different than it was maybe 8 years ago when I was in my early 30s. At that time, I learned about the idea of longevity science, which is a rapidly evolving field. There was a very powerful scientific paper that was written that identified what was known as the 9 hallmarks of aging. We now have 12 of those, and these were the biological causes of aging. And when I learned about that, that was the moment of epiphany, when I realized that all of the things that I had been trying to achieve over the previous decade and a half of wanting to be as healthy as I can, but also being mindful of the long term and not wanting to do anything detrimental to my later life. This paper really encapsulated that, to understand that there are known biological reasons why we get older. And the perspective I had was, well, what can I do to optimize those so that I feel as good as possible and am as healthy as possible today? And in 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now, I'm still as healthy as possible by trying to slow down those processes.
Okay, so when it was younger Chris, I mean, what were you, I guess, doing to slow down the biological aging? Was it simply just kind of working out? Was it eating better?
Yeah.
I mean, what kind of stuff were you thinking back then?
Yeah. So back then I wasn't even thinking of it in terms of slowing down biological aging. The concept was foreign to me. But what I was doing just for my everyday life was I was eating what was considered at the time to be the healthiest diet, which was like more of like a 40-30-30 diet, like 40% protein, 30% carbs, 30% fat. And I was actually trying to minimize that fat even further. So low fat diet, essentially, high protein, and didn't really value fat that much. I kind of avoided it at all costs. I've since learned that there are certain fats that are tremendously healthy for us, like omega-3s, DHA, and EPA. And there are other fats that are incredibly unhealthy. And so it's in the nuances, and you have to be more particular about fat. Same thing goes for carbs, and the same thing goes for proteins. So I was watching that. I was exercising a fair amount. So, going to the gym, weightlifting. I ran on the track team in high school. When I went to college, I didn't participate in the track team, but I was still continuing to run as if I was on the track team and going to the gym. I neglected sleep to my detriment. When you're in college, you don't really think of sleeping much. And in your early mid-20s, you're also not thinking of it. But by the time I reached my late 20s, that's when I started to pay attention to sleep, because I hadn't realized it for a long time, but sleep had an incredible impact on my life in terms of my mood, my memory, my cognition, my creativity, practically everything, my physical performance. And life was just better when I slept well. And so now I'm very religious about my sleep. I make sure that I'm very disciplined about what's called sleep hygiene, in terms of the noise in the room and the temperature of the room and the light in the room. Anything that I can control, especially when I'm at home, I do. And I have a pretty strict bedtime, at least on weekdays. On weekends, I stray a little bit, but within an hour or so, between 10 and 11 p.m., I'm getting into bed. And I wake up naturally. I don't need an alarm to wake me up, because, of course, I have one just in case, but I don't need it because I'm getting adequate sleep. And then I wake up feeling energized.
Well, so what was your intention, I guess, in college? What were you looking to make a living with? I mean, was it getting into, I guess, the physical realm? What was your focus?
So I studied at a school called Stern at NYU, at New York University. It's a business school. It was undergrad business school. And I majored in finance, economics, and international business. And so my intentions was to, at least when I entered the program, was to become an entrepreneur. And that was because when I was in high school, before the brain tumor, I was working as a programmer for a company in New York City. And it was an entrepreneurial startup company. And I saw the entrepreneurial culture, and I said, this is what I want to do for my future. I want to do something entrepreneurial. And then the brain tumor solidified that, where seeing how delicate life is and how short it can be, I wanted to make a maximum impact on the world. And I thought that entrepreneurship was my calling to be able to do that. But being at Stern, it's a finance heavy school, and all of my friends were going into banking, investment banking, and so on. And so I kind of fell into that trap, and I went into private equity my first year out of college. It was a very lucrative opportunity, great paycheck on Park Avenue in New York City, and I thought I hit the jackpot, and in some senses, I guess I did. But the money didn't speak to me. It wasn't the job that I wanted, and I put it, left it all behind. I quit the job and started a company of my own called Hot List, which was a social network that I had won NYU's business plan competition with. And I went years without salary. I spent through the savings I made from that first year on the job. And for most of my 20s, I was an entrepreneur with the ups and downs of entrepreneurship, right? Some extreme ups where I opened NASDAQ and I was on the billboards of Times Square, and extreme downs where essentially my first startup ended up imploding. We were being looked at by Facebook and Google to be acquired, and there was a lot of hope and optimism about what we could accomplish. And ultimately, there was a company in Asia, a very large company in Asia, that wanted to buy us. Right, so they said, and it turned out that they were actually just mining us for ideas, and they did not end up buying us. And at the time, we were out of money, unfortunately. As a social network, we weren't focused on revenue; we were focused on user growth, and we had decided rather than raising additional money to go for the acquisition, and we were left to to fail. And unfortunately, that's what ended up happening. So it was another life-changing event for me, going through the ups and downs of that experience, and really thinking about what I wanted out of my life.
How did those experiences change you compared to, I guess, the tumor, where it changed you to re-solidify the idea of being an entrepreneur, being hyper-focused in health? I mean, how did those situations right there, the highs and the lows, change the way you looked at, I guess, business and the world?
It first of all, it caused me to be a lot more introspective, and just to kind of put the brakes on my life and pause, and to really think about what is it that I actually want out of my life, but specifically entrepreneurship. Like, did I start the company to make a lot of money? Did I start the company to impact people's lives in a positive way? And the answer was, it was a little bit of both of those. But the question was, to what degree is it one or the other? And so ultimately, it led me to questioning everything that I was doing in my life, and it kind of recalibrated me. So I think of it almost as like peeling back the onion. There's all of these different layers that we have, and you want to get to the core truth. But we have these protective layers, or these perspectives, that eventually, as we age and mature and go through experiences, they become outdated. And it's up to us to take the initiative to notice those and to peel them back, and then to get to a deeper truth. And so losing the company after expecting I was going to be made a multimillionaire from selling the company, and then literally when the deal didn't go through, at the same time, Hurricane Sandy hit New York. My New York City apartment building was flooded, so we were kicked out of the building by the city for safety reasons. And when I returned to the building, my whole apartment was looted of all of my possessions, my valuables. And so I had $0, practically speaking, in my bank account, maybe $3,000 or something like that. And any valuables I had were taken, and I was left with nothing. And so that really, and I was single, no family, nothing, which in a sense is a blessing that I didn't have people relying on me, but also it made it that much more difficult not to have people to lean on also. And so just really made me question things and what I was in the entrepreneurial game for, which I never stepped away from, but I recentered myself and focused myself on what I ultimately wanted to do, which in this case, where I am now, is to try to help as many people as possible with their health, and to try to reduce the suffering that people experience, either personally because they're sick, or because, in some cases, even worse, because your loved ones are sick and feeling powerless about that, trying to minimize that as much as I'm personally able to do.
How long after that I guess the big learning experience of failing, I guess, right? Did it take for you to actually get back on the path of entrepreneurship and starting your new company?
It took some time. So I ended up doing some consulting for startups just so that I could pay the bills and survive. But with that said, it was a couple of years. There was a period of depression in there as well, which I had never experienced in my life, and fortunately never have since. And am optimistic that I never will again, because I've understood where that came from and how I can control that as much as is possible. And so it was a couple of years where I was I had some health issues as well, all in that concurrently in that period that I had seen doctors about, and they didn't really have any answers for me. And so that kind of set me off on my journey. So this all coincides with the longevity perspective, which is that during this period of me trying to rediscover myself and my passion and where I want to be, and while also experiencing some health difficulties, I ended up doing a tremendous amount of research. And all of my free time when I wasn't working, I was either doing experiments with different diets or supplements or lifestyle tweaks, or reading and researching scientific papers. And that's when I happened to come across this paper about longevity, and that epiphany moment took place. So it was a happy coincidence that these paths converged, which then set me off on a new journey.
Now, jumping into this space, you're dealing with the FDA, you're dealing with a lot of other entities right there that are kind of looking over your shoulders. And there's probably a lot of quote unquote charlatans out there saying they're promising a lot of things. What was that process of kind of building out this company in this new space that you're in?
So it started when I was volunteering at NYU Hospital, where my brain tumor was removed. I had promised myself when I was in the hospital when I was 16 that I would give back one day. And at this point I was, I don't know, in my early 30s, 30, 31, something like that. And I hadn't done it yet. And I said, I'm not married yet. I don't have a family or kids. If there's ever a time for me to do it, it's now. So I decided to volunteer with the pediatric ward at the hospital. And one day when I was leaving, I saw there was a poster on the wall for something called the Mitochondrial Summit. And this was all scientists and some medical doctors going to it. And I recognized some of the scientists who were presenting based on their research I had read over the years. And so I went to this event and I started asking them questions about natural over-the-counter supplements or ingredients that I had found research to indicate that they impacted these causes of aging, these hallmarks of aging. And I wanted to hear from them directly from their lips whether this was hype or if there's promise behind these ingredients to impact aging. And admittedly, I was surprised to hear from them that they were optimistic about these ingredients, that they thought they had a lot of promise. I was kind of expecting them to be pessimistic and say, oh, it's natural, it's not a pharmaceutical drug, so it doesn't really have that much potential. But they were very optimistic. And so at the time, everything in the space was biotech or academic. So, pharmaceutical drug development or DNA modification, like some crazy things that are being worked on in the longevity world, but nothing that was accessible, attainable for me and my family, my friends, my loved ones, my community at large, many of whom don't want to take prescription drugs, and I don't blame them for that. So that's when I had the validation I needed to say, I have something here. The market is not fully aware of longevity yet, but there's a tidal wave of interest that is building right now for longevity. It's expected to become the largest industry of all time over the next decade. And there's nothing in the consumer space to satisfy any of these needs that I'm identifying. So I decided to start the company. I brought on some of the world's best longevity scientists as scientific advisors. So people like Dr. George Church from Harvard and MIT. He's a professor at both. He invented the first direct genome sequencing method in the 1980s. He's a legend in the field of biology and genetics. And overall, we brought on 6 from Harvard, MIT, and the Salk Institute. These are world-renowned scientists. And together with them, we formulated our first product that we filed for a patent on that's currently pending. And we launched that product just over 2 years ago. We're doing independent studies with it, both in vitro human studies and clinical trials. And we're proving out the efficacy of our product.
The startup cost, something like that, it seems like it'd be fairly high. So what was that process like? Because did you have? I mean, I'm guessing venture capitalists, right, or other investors?
Well, so on the one hand, going a period in my life in which I had like no money to my name, and I was just like kind of scrapping things together. I learned how to be extremely frugal and get a lot done with very little money, and so I was able to do that for the first, let's just say, 18 months of the startup. I was able to get pretty far with bringing the scientists on board, building out the website, building out the prototype of the product, doing R&D testing with people for side effects and so on, and a whole bunch of things. But eventually, it was time to bring on friends and family for a small raise of a few $100,000 to then commercialize the product and do a large enough production run so that we could actually sell it. And then after we did that, it sold so well, so quickly, that we had enough of a story to 6 months after launching, raise our first institutional round of financing, which would be venture capitalists and angel investors. And that was in July of 2021. What
do you think? I mean, looking back at the window of time where, I mean, you use the word frugal and kind of building a new business, a brand right there. I mean, what are some like key takeaways that if another business owner or someone that has a dream of being an entrepreneur is looking at, that they should really remember when they don't have a lot of cash to start something? What are the best ways to be frugal?
Yeah, you may have heard this answer before, but it's one of the best that I can think of in the moment is the MVP approach, the minimal viable product approach. Like, try to break down everything that you're envisioning into the smallest step forward possible that would be positioned as an experiment in which you are learning something, right? So it's a very small step that is easy to execute on. It won't take months and months and months to execute on. It might take only a few weeks, let's say. It costs very little money, and you're going to learn something and get closer to the truth, so to speak, the truth of what consumers want, let's say, and to understand if there's a product market fit, and continually do that. So once you have some answers, you might rethink your next move, and then you plan it, and then you run another small iteration or improvement from where you are, and continually do that one after the other until you're starting to build something that has some momentum. And when you have that momentum, you can either decide that you're going to try to bootstrap it and monetize it yourself, or you decide, okay, now is the time to talk to investors, whether that's friends and family, of course, letting them know it's very high risk to make this investment. So it should only be with spare money. It shouldn't be with crucial money. And decide at that point, like, what exactly do you need to realize your vision, and what is your comfort level with asking for money, or what's the speed at which you're looking to execute? How big do you want the business to be? Everyone has different visions, right? If you want to build a multi-billion-dollar business, you probably need venture capital, because that's like high octane jet fuel to accelerate your business very quickly when you do find that product market fit. But if you're looking to build a lifestyle business, you might want to minimize the amount of investors you have, if any at all, because you're not looking for $1 billion business. You might be looking for a business that's worth a few $1 million. So it really depends on what your vision is for your business.
How much of I mean, asking for investments from your friends, I mean, finding, I guess, the physicians about your product, venture capitalists. I mean, how much of this was just learned, kind of just doing it, and other ones where you actually had someone you could reach out to, going, "Hey, I'm going down this next step. Can you give me an insight of what would be the best way of kind of breaching the situation?"
It was a combination. I mean, keep in mind that my first company I started when I was 21 and was raising venture capital at that time, and so I knew nothing about it other than having studied finance in school. So I understood the ideas of like risk reward and how people would assign valuations to different ideas based on their potential and their risk. So I understood it conceptually, but in terms of how to navigate that space and how to pitch and everything, it was a learning process. Part of it was helped by entering the NYU business plan competition and having to produce the presentations and the executive summaries and so on. It was a more traditional way of doing things, which at that young age was actually helpful for me to make me aware of what was expected and how to pitch an idea to people. So I would suggest for people who haven't done this before, YouTube is much more powerful today than it was when I was starting the business. In fact, I think YouTube was only 6 months old by the time I was starting the business back then. So that's one resource where you can find a lot of this, but also look to your local universities, look to different organizations. There's like a lot of entrepreneurial groups in different cities or states that you can probably get involved with in one capacity or another. So that's one part of it. The other part is that it is helpful to have either a mentor, advisor, or investor that you bring on that has done it before, knows how to pitch, has built a successful company before, has raised money before, and that they are willing to take the time to hold your hand a little bit with it. So even now, I mean, as many times as I've raised money and the millions of dollars that I've raised, as you get to different stages of investments, for example, there's different series of venture capital, Series C, Series A, Series B, C, D, and then private equity, and so on. In each of these different stages, there are different expectations from you as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, as well as from the company. And so I don't pretend to know what it's like to raise a Series D, as I've never done it before. And so having the right people on your investment team and advisor team to walk you through it and help you in the process, I think is critical.
Now, how do you find the right people? Is it just strictly kind of word of mouth? Is it kind of like putting into the universe? I mean, what have you found has been the best way to find the right people in those positions, and I guess for your company too?
You got to be scrappy about it. There's no single best answer. It's you have to have an entrepreneurial mind about finding these people. So what is that? What does that mean? It really means experimenting, trying all different methods. So for example, one is what I mentioned, like looking at local universities, local entrepreneurial groups. Another is maybe going on LinkedIn and finding investors, and don't go for like the biggest name at the biggest firm. Look for people that are, maybe like a little bit newer. They're knowledgeable, but they have maybe more time to lend, or they're more likely to get back to you, and play a numbers game, reach out to a whole bunch of them, but do it in a personalized way, not a generic message. Like say something personal about them that's going to increase the chances they respond to you. There are, podcasts are fantastic. Whether you're watching YouTube or you're just subscribed to entrepreneurial podcasts, when you listen to them enough, you start, knowing the lingo, the language, the things people care about. And so this way, when you are interacting with people that you're asking to get involved in one way or another, you're kind of speaking their language. And so they're that much more likely to be receptive of you. So it's a hybrid approach. There's no single best answer to it, but I would say, trying a little bit of everything and seeing where you get a little bit of interest. And then all it takes is that one person who is very knowledgeable, who's willing to lend you a hand for you to have what you need to get to that next level as a founder.
Thank you so much, Chris, for being on the Road to Growth podcast. I think for everyone listening, you're so hyper focused on kind of what's next and where you're going to take it. Before I get to my last question, I wanted to know what's the best way of people getting more information about your company.
Sure. So they can go to novoslabs.com. We're a public benefit corporation, so we offer a lot of free resources. If you go to our blog, there's a section on the top menu that says knowledge, and then you can find the blog there. We have a questionnaire that can give you your longevity score based on your lifestyle and give you then tips and tricks to improve your longevity. We also have something called Face Age that you can search for on the website, which is AI powered. It will analyze your selfie and then tell you how old your face is perceived to be, as well as skin health markers like inflammation or pore size or wrinkles. And then again, of course, we don't leave you empty-handed. We then give you advice and guidance for how to improve all of these. And so that's all novoslabs.com. We're on all of the social networks as Novos Labs. And then I have a personal website, Slow My Age, which talks about the things that I personally do. So anyone who really wants to dig in and geek out about like the science behind it and all of the different tests you can do, they can check out Slow My Age or follow me on Instagram and Twitter.
And for all those people that might be scared of seeing what the AI is going to tell you look like age-wise, you can only get past the problem if you know the problem. So, okay, Chris, I want to finish off with this one last question. If we were talking in 5 years from now, and I know you already talked about AI and all these other items that you have on your actual website right now, and where are you guys going in the next 5 years? Where do you think you're going to be changing? How's the business going to look different? Where are you going to be in the next 5 years?
Well, the field that we work in, which is longevity medicine, longevity science, is a rapidly evolving field. It's kind of like a black hole sucking so many of the brightest minds in academia into this field, because it's understood that when you address the causes of aging, you can have a positive impact on the risk of disease, and you can extend health span and lifespan. So not only helping people live longer, but helping them live healthier for longer. And so when you address those causes, you're going to reduce the risks of things like cancer and heart disease and diabetes and dementia and so on. So it's kind of like, let's focus on the common denominator of all of these different diseases rather than looking at each disease individually, because there's the same common traits that cause all of these things. So with all of this attention, the field is evolving so quickly that there's going to be new discoveries, new innovations. And we are, as a consumer company, positioned to deliver the latest innovations in a very safe and accountable way to consumers, whether that be in the form of new product formulations or tests like we offer the Novos Age test that I mentioned before, or in the form of free knowledge and digital experiences where people will be able to learn and do things for little to no cost. In fact, there are things you can do for your longevity that will save you money. For example, fasting is an amazing way to be able to improve your health, and you'll actually save money because you're eating less. So not everything is going to cost you money. We want to make longevity as accessible to the everyday person as possible. It's not simply for billionaires. It's for you and me as well.
Yeah, isn't there someone that's like talking about billionaires, or maybe he's millionaires, I think it's billion, that he's trying to reverse his age right now? He's been in the news pretty frequently.
Yeah. So there is one person who I think you're talking about, who is working very hard on that. He's putting a couple of millions of dollars per year into trying to reverse his age. Between us, I do have a better epigenetic score than he does, and I'm not spending millions. But you can learn more about that on our website in terms of the steps to follow. And but yes, there's a big budget, I presume, to also get that media attention as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, thank you again, Chris, for being on the podcast. I think there's so many nuggets right there that you've laid out in here, and I mean, just having the tenacity to kind of know, okay, next step, I want to focus on this. Next step, focus on this. Next step, focus on this. So for people listening that are saying, hey, you know what? I can't build this company. I can't build this business because I don't have the money to do it. just like Chris has talked about multiple times, I mean, if you really are an entrepreneur, you're going to find a way. You're going to find a way to get out there. And like he said, I mean, you reached out to so many people and finally got some yeses out of it. So thank you guys for listening. Please go in the show notes, go find Chris, do that face assessment, and maybe some intermittent fasting. Thanks, guys. Have a great one. On to the next one. Bye, everyone.